So today is what? What day is today?
Thursday.
Today is Thursday. Yes. Well, that's. It doesn't feel like Thursday.
No,
It doesn't feel like any day. It feels like limbo day, and I don't mean the game. It
no.
feels like I'm just, aimless. I have no structure to my week
Yeah.
because, like most Christians, my week is centered around, orbits around 2 days, Sunday and Wednesday. And that's not just because I'm a preacher, and it's not just because I'm a Bible class teacher on Wednesday nights. It's because those are the days when I am around my family, my spiritual family. And we had a very, very short service Sunday. I mean, think about it. We usually meet 3 hours
Right.
spread out over Sunday,
Yeah.
and we met for one.
Right.
And then there's an hour on Wednesday night, and that's class plus the devotional before that, plus the mingling after.
Right.
And we didn't have anything on Wednesday.
Right.
So last night was Wednesday night, right?
Mm-hmm.
It didn't feel like it. It felt like some weird hybrid of Monday and Thursday and Friday. No, it didn't feel like anything normal. It felt very wrong.
Yeah.
And preachers say this all the time. We tell our members, you need Wednesday night because your week will drag. The world will just beat you up all week long, and you need that kind of pick-me-up to get through the rest of the week to get back to Sunday.
Yeah.
And I have never, other than times when I was grossly sick, I can maybe count on one hand the number of Wednesday nights that I've not attended
Right.
somewhere since the year 2000.
Mm-hmm.
So for 20 years, I've had that pick-me-up. And now I feel deprived.
Yeah.
And I think about those weaker brethren who just casually skip, hardly ever, if ever, come on Wednesday night. And I think, boy, how do they even survive?
Yeah.
We're not talking about the bare minimum. We're talking about going below the bare minimum.
Yeah.
You're going below survival because I feel like I'm barely hanging on. It's Thursday, and I'm ready to kill you.
Yeah.
I need that energize.
Yeah.
And I didn't get it yesterday, and I'm lacking it.
Yeah, I felt that same way. Kira and I last night went to Walmart, and I looked down at my watch, and it was 6 o'clock.
You feel guilty?
And I felt guilty,
Yeah.
and just sick. Like there was this emptiness that was in my stomach because we were not where we normally are on Wednesday nights.
Right.
And Wednesday nights usually are that time where everybody's rushing home from
Sure.
work, feed the kids. Sometimes we were able to bathe our kids before, and then we all get dressed and come to church and enjoy worship and fellowship together. And last night, like you, I was just lacking. I had this emptiness about me. And honestly, that carried over to this morning. I woke up this morning feeling very depressed and down on myself just a little bit because I think what you were talking about, just that lack.
Yeah.
I've attended Wednesday night services my whole life, and I think I could count on my hand 5 times that maybe I've missed because I've been sick. But to not go last night, I woke up even this morning feeling just terrible and depressed. And I think with everything that's been going on, it's easy to get in that mode. And I'm a happy guy. I'm like always very positive and never. You call me the unflappable Alex Mills.
Right.
Anything can happen, and I'm still pretty even keeled. But here, with this, it's just been more depressing. And I think it's because I've had this lack of connection with my church family.
Yeah.
And that depression can even sink in, and it festered into some anxiety.
Sure.
I told Kira this morning that I felt like I had these weights pressing down on my chest and this headache that was going on, all because of being out of sorts this entire week. And that's not a good feeling for us. Now, I know different things that I can do to make myself feel better. When I've faced any kind of anxiety or any kind of depression, I do certain things to help bring myself out of that, and I have to be reminded of that now. Do you ever feel that way, that you have to do something to get yourself out of a funk?
Yes, yeah. And I'll say this just as a disclaimer: I live with anxiety. It is just a part of my life. We know other people who have the same struggles, and we all deal with it in different ways and have different degrees of it. But just only speaking for myself, I am always on edge. I'm always anxious. I'm always feeling a sense of tension, no matter what's going on. And so whenever things get like this, and they're even more so out of sorts,
even your positive people around you are feeling that.
So I'm really feeling that. It really hinders me and affects me. And I guess everybody's different, but for myself, whenever I get really out of sorts and I'm really frustrated, or I have a bad phone call with somebody, or something doesn't go right, I get bad news, and I get really upset, I just can't work. You know, I
Hmm.
am not able to do my work, not just properly, but at all. I cannot get in the right frame of mind. Everybody does different jobs, we all have different works. You know, and the work that I do, the kind of work that I do, if I'm not in the right frame of mind, I'm no good to anybody.
Hmm.
Not my Christ and not my church family.
Yeah.
And so one thing that I do to kind of get myself, you know, mellowed out is I draw. You
Hmm.
know, I turn to art and just creative things because my mind is usually so focused on the logical and the intellectual side that doing the opposite, just turning off that part of my brain, turning on some music, and just exercising my creativity, that
Hmm.
really kind of calms me down.
Yeah, and that's kind of an opposite of what you normally are. You know, you're very analytical, and you usually are, able to, you know, think things logically, and so turning on another part of your brain
Right,
helps release that kind of energy, that bad energy that you
right.
may have.
Hmm.
Yeah, I feel that same way as well too. Now, I'm not, I don't deal with anxiety at the level that you do or anything like that. But there are times, I was telling my mother even this morning, there are times that even positive Alex is feeling down, and I find myself needing to get more and more busy
Hmm.
to be able to get myself out of that kind of feeling.
Well, this must be tough for you because you can't do too much
Right.
right now.
Well, that's what I was telling my mom. I'm like, Mom, my whole life is built around being with the church,
Yeah.
and I'm not able to be with the church. And so that's why I think I have felt that anxiety and that
Hmm.
depression this week. And so, but one of the things that I do to get myself out of that is finding other ways to work, and other ways to get productive. And so there's other things that I'm able to do, even up here at the church building in our office. And there's other things that are certainly on our plates that we weren't planning on being on our plate this
Right.
week. But still, I have to find an outlet that's not necessarily associated with the work that we do right here at North Heights. And one of the things that I do, I love to garden. I love to be outside in my backyard and working on something at the house. That's when I can get myself out of that depression, out of that anxiety.
Hmm.
A few years ago, when I lost my job, I was laid off at Axiom. I come home and I had one sheet of plywood, and I took that piece of plywood and I measured out and I calculated exactly how much of that plywood that I could use to create a shelf. And so I cut it all down and I built it, and I used every little bit of that piece of plywood, and I built a shelving unit and I painted it gray, and it's sitting in our house right now.
A sad gray color.
Well, it's a nice neutral color.
Yeah.
It's nice. But it was so funny because when I was home and I needed to get myself out of that depression, I turned to using working something with my hands, and that helps me get through that.
Yeah.
And I don't know, I think God created us to be productive people.
Yeah. Hmm.
I think He created us to work. He does say, whatever you do, do all in the name of the Lord Jesus. So there's some aspect of action that we put into our Christian lives. He's expecting something that we produce. And so, that's what I need to do as a Christian. And it reminds me of this passage that Jesus talks about it in Matthew 25, the parable of the talents, where the master
Right.
goes away on a travel for a while, and he gives to each one of his servants some talents. One guy gives 5, another guy gives 2, and then one guy gives 1. And each one of them was to be responsible with those talents. So when the master comes back, he asked for them to come back and report what they've done. And the guy with 5 talents was able to say, look, I have invested this, and I've got you now 10 talents.
Right.
And he says, well done, my good and faithful servant. And then the second guy, he's able to take the 2 and he makes 4 out of it.
Right.
And so he's also pleased with that. But then there's the one guy who took the talent and he buried it in the ground. And then the master comes back and he says, here's your old dirty coin.
Right.
And so that's not productive. And he says, you are a wicked and lazy slave.
Yeah.
So that tells me that God is looking for us to find ways that we could be productive. And I think that even in times of anxiety, in times of depression, we need to keep ourselves busy.
Right.
You know the old saying, the idle hands are the devil's workshop. Yeah. So that phrase tells me that if I am going to just sit around and do nothing, then the devil's going to find something in me that I can do to be productive for him.
Hmm.
And instead, I need to be busy and working hard for the Lord. and doing the very best I can. That's going to help me get out of that funk and out of that anxiety.
Yeah. And we're not licensed counselors, so we're not giving medical advice, but just speaking from experience, just anecdotally, if a person is, or at least just for myself, if I am feeling, despondent or depressed in kind of a general way, or just anxious, I do myself a lot of harm if I just do nothing. It's what I feel like I might want to do, and I might say I just don't feel like doing anything, but that just tends to feed that beast. Whereas if I find my way to get, well, I say creative, but really it's just being constructive, doing something. It's just I'm not doing what I usually do because I'm not in the right frame of mind to do that, so I'll do something else. Same amount of energy, but something else, and that will help me get out of that rut. We get into trouble when we say, I'm just going to lay and curl into a ball and just lay there and take it. That's no good to anybody or to yourself.
Right.
You mentioned that text. I was thinking not necessarily a particular text, but just kind of an observation about Paul, who himself confesses anxiety. He talked about how he was constantly anxious over the affairs of the church. Paul was a tent maker, and he would not say that was his job. His job is Christ. It was his life. He did that for his life. But there were those times when to make a living, yes, he made tents. But I couldn't help but think, when you're making a tent, you're not preaching to somebody else. But what you are doing is you are kind of collecting your thoughts.
Oh, yeah.
You are inside your own head. You're mellowing out. You're letting go of the anxiety and the trouble and the problems that other people have presented to you. And we all know Paul had a lot of enemies. So he's able to kind of flush that out of his mind as he's making those tents. And I think that helped him refocus. It helped him clear his mind and be energized so he can go back out and preach. And so my tent making is drawing. Your tent making is gardening. Not tent making in the sense of we sell it, but in the sense of it's able to be another thing we do.
Yeah.
The key is there, it's something we do.
Yeah. It's a release of that energy to lift us up out of whatever is going else on in our minds and in our lives. So, well, here's what I would like for people to do. I would want someone to comment, and tell us, what do you do to release that kind of anxiety or that depression? What do you do to get yourself out of that? Or do you find yourself being creative, or do you find yourself maybe going and spending an enormous amount of time reading in the Scripture? Some people say, I'm just going to read the Psalms to help me get out of this depression or this anxiety. So tell us, what do you do to get yourself out of that feeling of anxiety and depression?
And you might hear this and think, well, I can't think of anything. Well, just come back. You might see some comments and spark an idea, because we all need to be doing something, especially right now where we're limited in what we're allowed to do and can do. Well, let's be creative. Let's look for other things we could do to be productive.
Yep.
God bless you.